Now, your first question is about structural reforms and what we need, and I'm going to switch it to the economics. Social policy is very good. I support it entirely. When I go to bed at night, I'm a true socialist, thinking what can we do about poverty and all that, but without a good, strong economy, we cannot do it. To paraphrase a 19th century philosopher, Karl Marx, he said the history of the world is driven by their economy. So we first have to fix the economy before we can implement social reform. Social reform should be superimposed on a well-functioning economy. Now, how can we make the economy well-functioning? Well, there are many ways of organizing your economy, but Greece and the European South have made a choice by getting into the European Union. The European Union, whether you like it or not, is a market economy, it's decentralized, it's a liberal capitalist system. And unless you make your economies liberal capitalist economies, they ain't going to function. You have to accept that. You can have as good social policy as you want, as redistributive as you want it. You can improve on Denmark and Sweden, if you like, but the economy has to be a free, open economy. Otherwise, you will not be competitive enough to compete in this world. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that free markets have to be functioned without restrictions. You have to make them more flexible. You have to encourage openness, transparency, competitiveness, all these things that we see in the north of Europe, and we see them having no poverty, essentially. I mean, Germany has the lowest unemployment it's had since 1990. There is virtually no poverty in the Scandinavian countries. But all this is based on their openness and their competitiveness. I mean, look at the companies that come out of those countries. We have Lego from Denmark, one of the most successful companies in the world, especially if you have children. It's a God's gift to parents. You can lock up children in their room with Lego and they leave you alone. We have Volvo in Sweden. In the South, we don't have this kind of companies because we are not competitive enough. Now, switching to Greece, because it's a huge red clock in front of me, moving rather fast. What does the country need? I agree entirely, actually, with Mrs. Diamantopoulou that we do need to implement reforms and we need to accelerate the legal system. I mean, as most of you probably know, I'm from Cyprus. Cyprus is even worse than Greece, believe it or not. It's impossible to take anything to court because it just takes so long for the court to make a decision. I don't mean criminal cases, if there is a murder or something, which luckily enough, these things are very rare in Cyprus. They do reach decisions quickly. But when it comes to civil cases, disputes, contractual disputes, there's just no point in going to court. It just lasts forever. And it's all done on paper, piled up and everything. So you end up reaching agreements out of court, which discourages a lot of people from investing in the country. Now, going strictly to the economics, what does Greece need? Well, what Greece needs is obviously more investment. I mean, Greece currently invests about 10% of its GDP. It's not even enough to replace its capital stock. China is growing at the rate it is by investing 45% of its GDP. I think that's too much, but it does invest 45 still. Korea, the Republic of Korea, invests 30% of its GDP and does a lot of R&D. That's how all these companies have established themselves in the world. The north of Europe, which is Germany in particular, Britain, United States, because they're mature economies, they invest about 20 to 22% of their GDP. Greece that needs to grow, it's investing 10. It just cannot grow without investment. It cannot have more job creation without it. So any structural reform that encourages more investment will be good for Greece. Now, what do business people look at when they're going to invest? They want to see transparency, they want to see no corruption in public service, they want to see competitive product markets. Leave the labor market alone. The big mistake that the reformers have made in Greece, the institution, is to emphasize the labor market more than the product market. That's a mistake. It's probably the biggest mistake they've made. Just opening up the labor market when you have restrictions in product markets in terms of monopoly barriers, legal and that, is not going to give you any results. You have to reform the product market environment. remove any restrictions that might give rise to monopolies. Greece has the biggest monopoly concentration in Europe. Simplify administrative burdens, make it easy for people to start new businesses. Remove political uncertainty about the reforms. Tell people what reforms you are doing and tell them that you like them and that's why you're doing them, because they're good for your country. Give the chance to young people to unleash their entrepreneurial spirit. The United States, Silicon Valley is driven by young people. You know, if you're 40 there, you're too old, you get out. In Greece, young people are just unemployed and they cannot go into entrepreneurial activity. All those things together, if you do them, they're going to bring results. And then superimpose on that the social transfers that you want. I'm very much in favor of them. You probably guessed by now that which my favorite country in Europe is, which is Denmark. That's the way they do it. Why can't Greece be like Denmark? I don't know. Maybe could. Now, second part of your question is, do we need coalitions? Here actually we have to be, so there's one other thing I want to say about investment. I emphasize private investment, but there's also state investment, infrastructure investment. This has to be done by the government. And I think this is where our negotiators here didn't handle the negotiations with the institutions well. What the institutions want is to make sure that they get their money back, because they don't like the idea that there should be more haircuts of debt. So when the country goes to borrow money, the institutions say, okay, you know, I can lend you the money, but run such and such a primary budget surplus quickly because I want to get my money back. The country simply cannot function with the budget surpluses that it has accepted. What it needs to do is to go back to them and say, I've got facilities currently, which will last another 5 years on repayment of debt. There is no urgency on running budget surpluses now. Instead of running a budget surplus, let me invest this money in infrastructure investment. The country will then recover, and when the country recovers, I'll be able to collect more taxation and pay you back your debt, which is something I should say, we're talking with Mr. Simitis, with President Simitis last night as well. It's a policy that I cannot see any reasonable person in the institutions, the IMF and the European Commission, disagreeing to that. I don't know why our government, I mean the Greek government, didn't go to say that. Okay, switching now to whether we need coalitions. I think here we have to be careful. Remember, I'm not any member of any political party. I'm outside. In fact, I'm what the British call floating voter. I've voted for the entire spectrum of parties according to their economic policies. The key to success within the country is not whether you have a single political party in power or whether you have a coalition. The key to success for reform is to have an ownership of reform. Now, this is what Mr. I don't want you to think that I'm echoing Mr. Mitsotakis' interview last night, because he made his first point on ownership of report. I outlined this with a co-author and friend, Yannis Ioannidis, in the Brookings papers last year, how you could make reforms work. And that's what we emphasized. What we emphasized is that reforms succeed in a country when there is a group, a powerful group in the population that feel that they'll be better off after the reform. In Greece, there is no one who thinks they'll be better off after the reform. So whether you have a coalition, whether you have a single party, it's just not going to work. When you have your prime minister telling you it's not good for the country, you're not going to be better off afterwards, but I'm going to do it anyway, of course it's not going to work. You know, I mean, it's sort of is no-brainer. You need to persuade people that if you reform there, although it's going to be painful, it's going to be good for you in the future. You know, if you're going to reform the education system, for example, you need to persuade students that they're going to be better off after the reform. So you get student groups to work for the reform. Instead, in this country especially, when you try to reform the education system, students think they're going to be worse off, professors think they're going to be worse off, and the students occupy universities. And what did the government do? It made it illegal for the police to go in and break up the occupation of the universities, and therefore we don't have any functioning universities. What's the result of that? The best Greek students go abroad to study Do they come back to get jobs? Well, there are no jobs for them to get if they come back, so they stay abroad. Well, this is not the way to make a country grow. Make students realize that they're better off after the reform, so they're the ones pushing for the reform. If they're not being implemented, then they go and strike. You know, you strike when you see your professors and you see the Ministry of Education not implementing the reforms, not when you see them trying to implement the reforms. That's what it means to have ownership of reform. I said we need to remove any restriction in the market that encourages monopolies. How do you do that? Well, persuade all these young people who are unemployed and all the others who are in poverty that they'll be better off if you remove all these restrictions that encourage monopolies. So don't make them go out into Syntagma Square and demonstrate against the reforms. Make them go and demonstrate against those who are restricting the reforms. You know, they should be shouting the minister's name and saying, implement, implement, implement. No, give us back our jobs, give us back our wages. Well, the money is not there to pay them anyway. Now, that's absolutely essential, I think, for the country reform and governance at country level. But at European level, we certainly need more cooperation. I mean, like Europe, currently in the Eurogroup, it's being run like a one-party government. And that party speaks German or some kind of German derivative like Dutch. I don't know, I'm assuming that Dutch is German derivative, the economies anyway. Which again, you know, I mean, like the most important decisions currently that affect us in the South are made by the Eurogroup, which doesn't even have a legal standing in European law, as the President outlined in his inaugural speech here. At European level, you know, once the north of Europe, and us, of course, as well, agree to form the European Union single market, be even more important, the Eurozone, then it means that we have agreed to form a coalition. So run it as a coalition. So don't go and obey what the Eurogroup says. Go and demonstrate in the Eurogroup. Tell them this is not a one-party government. Listen to us too. Thank you.